Hello, researchers. Welcome to the place where we examine history beyond the paradigms of the Enlightenment and return to the sources themselves. The place where the testimonies of the ancient chroniclers are recorded. Our goal is simple: to understand what the sources truly say about the antiquity of the Slavic world. In the previous episode, we examined the figure of Ostrogotha. From Jordan's account, we learned that the very name Goths originates from him. He appears as the leader of both the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths. We also saw Jordan's account of the first Roman emperor of Gothic origin, Maximinus Thrax. And so, three major groups of Goths are formed, corresponding to the three groups of Slavs. The Eastern Slavs, the ancient Getae. The Western Slavs, the Visigoths, the Western Goths. The Southern Slavs, those Goths who were within the borders of the Roman Empire and gradually rose to power within the empire itself. But before we move forward, we must clarify something very important. In order to understand this narrative, we must go much further back in time. We must see when the Slavic-Scythian community began to take shape and how it gradually spread across space. We will see that the roots of this community can be traced through several key elements: the cult of the hero, royal authority, and the concept of the sacred power of the ruler. It is precisely through these elements that we can trace the development of a shared cultural tradition that would later encompass vast territories of Europe. Around 3500–3000 BC, a contact and collision can be observed between the Yamnaya culture of the northern Black Sea region and the Danubian civilization of the Balkans. In this contact zone, a cultural community gradually takes shape, which we can call Thraco-Pelasgian. Within this world, several key ideas are formed: the cult of the hero, royal authority, and the concept of sacred power, a power that derives from the gods. Around 1500 to 1200 BC, a new process begins. From this southeastern European area, we observe the spread of the cult of the hero to the north, toward the lands around the Vistula and the Oder. Into Scandinavia. Archaeological data show that the earliest centers of warrior culture in this region are located in southern Scandinavia, especially in the regions of Gotaland and on the island of Gotland in the Baltic Sea. There, archaeologists have discovered some of the earliest weapon burials, indicating a clearly defined warrior aristocracy. In these burials, swords, spears, and shields are found, symbols of a society in which the warrior and the hero hold a central place. The earliest clear archaeological evidence of this warrior culture in southern Scandinavia appears around 1500 BC. From this region, the same cultural tradition gradually spreads to the northern parts of Scandinavia. This means that the cult of the hero and warrior deities was first established in the southern part of the peninsula and only later spread to the north. A quotation from Gepids follows. Then, as we have said, after a long siege and after enriching himself with the reward, the Geta returned to his lands. Seeing this, the people of the Gepids, envying his constant victories and spoils, took up arms against their own relatives. If you ask how the Getae and the Gepids are related, I will answer briefly. You must remember that at the beginning I told how the Goths emerged from the womb of the island of Skansa with their king Barig, carried in only 3 ships, and reached the shore of the nearby ocean called Gothiskansa. One of these 3 ships, as often happens, was slower and is said to have given the people their name. For in their language, Gapanta means slow or sluggish. From this it came about that, gradually and with a distortion of the word, as a form of mockery, they were called Gepids. And they too undoubtedly trace their origin to the stock of the Goths, but since, as I said, Gapanta means something slow and lazy, from this gratuitous insult the name, Gepids, arose. And this, I think, is not entirely without reason, because they are indeed slower in mind and heavier in bodily movement. Here Jordanes continues the account of Ostrogotha's campaign in the siege of Marcianopolis, explaining the cause of the war between the Goths and the Gepids. According to him, the conflict arose because of the Gepids' envy of the wealth and victories that Ostrogotha gained after the war. After that, however, Jordanes once again brings us back to the northern tradition of the origin of the Goths, recalling the legend of the island of Scanza and the first Gothic king Berig. Here we can clearly see the way Jordanes works with ancient traditions. He often uses mythological narratives to explain the kinship between different peoples of the northern Black Sea region and the Scythian lands. We see the same approach not only with the Gepids. Jordanes also presents the kinship between the Goths and the Huns through a mythological narrative, the story of demons who possess Gothic women and from whom the people of the Huns are born. In this way, the chronicler uses mythological language to indicate which peoples in the Scythian lands were perceived as related or close. Another interesting detail appears. Jordanes tells that the Gepids originate from the same migration from the island of Scanza, but before that he already mentions Gothic groups known as the Goths, who had settled in southern Scandinavia, near the island of Gotland. This means that it is entirely possible that there was movement of Gothic groups in both directions, toward Scandinavia and back toward continental Europe. At the same time, we must note something important. In the earlier part of his account, Jordanes does not mention the Gepids as a separate people. They appear only in later events. If we take his legend literally, that the Gepids originate from the original migration from Scanza, this would mean that they are an extremely ancient people, existing already at the time of the Scythian wars with the Egyptians. But historical sources show that the Gepids emerged as a distinct political group much later. Therefore, Jordanes' account should not be taken literally. Rather, it should be understood as a transmission of a mythological tradition through which the chronicler attempts to explain the kinship between different peoples of the Gothic and Scythian world. A quotation from Gepids follows. These Gepids, driven by envy, while they dwelled in the region of Spesis, on an island surrounded by the fords of the river Vistula, which in their own language they called Gepidoios. Today, as it is said, this island is inhabited by the people of the Vidavari, after the Gepids themselves moved to better lands. The Vidavari, in turn, are gathered from different peoples, as if into one refuge, and have formed as a separate people. And so, as we have said, the Gepid king Fastida, having stirred up his peaceful people, expanded his native borders by force of arms. He nearly annihilated the Burgundians and subdued other peoples as well. And as he recklessly provoked the Goths, he broke the bond of kinship with bold and arrogant audacity, seeking to acquire lands for his growing people, while making his native lands increasingly sparse. He sent envoys to Ostrogotha, under whose rule at that time were both the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths, that is, both parts of the same people, complaining that he was pressed by harsh mountains and dense forests. And he demanded one of two things: either prepare for war, or yield land. A commentary follows. This passage is important because Jordanes provides us with a geographical framework for the early lands of the Gepids. He places them in the region around the Vistula River, which includes them within the broad northern European and Black Sea cultural world that ancient authors often describe as the Scythian world. At the same time, the account shows something else. The Gepids are already organized as a kingdom, led by a ruler such as King Fastida. This implies a society with clearly defined royal authority, a warrior aristocracy, and a cult of the hero, characteristics typical of the heroic societies of the Scythian and northern Pontic cultural sphere. That is why, in Jordanes' narrative, the Gepids do not appear as part of some abstract Germanic world, but as a people belonging to the wider Scythian cultural area. A quotation from Gepids follows. Then Ostrogotha, king of the Goths, being a man of firm spirit, replied to the envoys that the war would be terrible and grievous. and that it is utterly wrong to wage war against one's own kin, but he would not yield land. What more, the Gepids rushed into war, and Ostrogotha, so as not to be considered weaker, also raised his army. They met at the city of Galtes, near which flows the river Auha, and there a fierce battle was fought with great valor on both sides, since the similarity in weapons and manner of fighting drove them against one another. But the better cause and the liveliness of spirit tipped the scales in favor of the Goths. At last, when the Gepids were pressed hard, night brought the battle to an end. Then King Fastida, leaving behind the destruction of his people, hastened to return to his homeland. Humbled by shame as much as he had previously been lifted up by pride, the victorious Goths, satisfied with the retreat of the Gepids, returned and lived happily in peace in their land, while Ostrogotha was their leader. After his death, Niva, having divided the army into two parts, sent one group to ravage Mosia. Knowing that due to the negligence of the authorities it was left without defenders, while he himself, with 70,000 men, attacked Iusia, that is, Novi. From there, driven off by the commander Gallus, he turned toward Nicopolis, the renowned city on the river Yantra, which Trajan had founded and named the City of Victory after defeating the Sarmatians. When Emperor Decius arrived, Niva withdrew into the regions of Hemus, which were not far away, and from there, after making preparations, hastened toward Philippopolis. A commentary follows. Jordanes describes the victory of the Goths under King Ostrogotha. But after his death, the narrative shifts to the rule of King Niva, who begins a campaign against the Roman Empire. It is precisely here that an interesting detail appears. When Jordanes speaks of the city Nicopolis ad Istrum, he reminds us that Emperor Trajan founded it after his victory over the Sarmatians. This is not a random note. In this way, Jordanes shows us how he himself understands the geography north of the Danube. For him, these lands form a broad Scytho-Sarmatian belt. In this logic, the different peoples, the Goths, Gepids, Dacians, and Sarmatians, are not seen as completely separate worlds, but as part of a wide Scythian cultural area that ancient authors often describe with common names. That is why in Jordanes we see that Dacians, Scythians, and Sarmatians are one and the same people. This is not an accidental inaccuracy, but a conscious way of thinking that follows the logic of his narrative up to this point. A quotation from Getica follows. When he learned of his retreat and wished to come to the aid of the city itself, Emperor Decius crossed the ridge of Mount Hemus and reached Barrow. There, while restoring his exhausted horses and army, Niva suddenly descended with the Goths like lightning, shattered the Roman army, and forced the emperor, with the few who managed to escape, to return back to Iusia through the mountains in Mosia. At that time, the commander Gallus was there with a large army. Having gathered the troops both from there and from Iusia, Decius prepared for a decisive battle. Meanwhile, after a long siege, Niva captured Philippopolis and, having amassed plunder, formed an alliance with the local leader Priscus, as if to wage war against Decius. When the two sides met in battle, Decius' son was pierced by an arrow and died a cruel death. Although it is said that the father, in order to strengthen the spirit of the soldiers, declared, "Let no one mourn. The loss of one soldier is not a loss to the state," still, unable to endure a father's grief, he threw himself against the enemy, seeking either death or vengeance for his son. Upon reaching the city of Abritus in Mosia, he was surrounded by the Goths and perished there, thus ending both his life and his reign at the same time. That place is still called the Altar of Decius, because there, before the battle, he remarkably offered sacrifices to the idols. A commentary follows. The first battle takes place near Barrow, where Niva manages to defeat the Roman army. After this victory, he besieges and captures Philippopolis, which is plundered. After capturing the city, Niva entrusts it to the local leader Priscus. This is a very important figure, because through him Niva secures an ally among the local forces. Priscus most likely comes from the Thracian Gothic world. It is possible that he had served in the Roman army. But after the capture of Philippopolis he joins Niva and proclaims himself emperor of the Roman Empire. Such a phenomenon is not unusual for this period. We see a similar example in Maximinus Thrax, who also comes from the Thracian world and rises to imperial power. After that, the allied forces of Niva and Priscus confront the army of Decius. The decisive clash takes place at Abritus, where the Roman army is defeated and Decius himself is killed in the battle. After the defeat, the commander Gallus withdraws with the remnants of the Roman army to the fortress of Novi on the Danube. There, the soldiers proclaim him as the new emperor. This passage clearly shows an important picture. The Gothic forces operate not only north of the Danube, but also within the Balkan provinces of the empire. In Thrace itself, there exist Gothic groups and local leaders who can ally with Gothic armies and even lay claim to the Roman imperial throne. And so, friends, we have seen that the Slavs lived within the framework of one state for thousands of years, and in this way different genetic groups developed a common language, a common culture, royal authority, and a cult of the hero. We have also seen that groups such as the Gepids belong to this Scythian Gothic tradition. In the further narrative of Jordanes, we will examine other groups that are related and are part of the Slavic world. Thank you, friends, for watching this video. Subscribe to the channel and leave your opinion in the comments.